Hello, everybody, and welcome to Speaking of the Arts. I am Mike Epstein, your host, and today's episode is a real treat. We are featuring the drummer, educator, entrepreneur, author, nonprofit organizer, band leader, producer, etc., etc. The list really goes on and on. The one, the only, Ulysses Owens Jr. I've always been a fan of Ulysses' drumming, but until I did my research for this interview, I really had no idea just how multifaceted he is. In fact, it was a challenge just to summarize his extensive biography for this introduction. Here are a few quick highlights. Ulysses has been named a rising star by DownBeat's critics poll for 5 years straight. He is a recipient of the 2013 ASCAP Plus Award, a gold medal winner of the 2014 Global Music Awards, a 2015 Jazz at Lincoln Center Swing Awards honoree, and a 2019 third runner-up in Classic Jazz category in the Modern Drummer magazine Readers' Poll. Among many of Owens' accomplishments are his performances on the 2010 Grammy Award-winning Kurt Elling live album Dedicated to You, and the 2012 Grammy Award-winning Christian McBride Big Band album, The Good Feeling. His work with Joey Alexander, the Christian McBride Trio, and Gregory Porter have also received recognition by the Recording Academy, garnering Grammy nominations for the albums My Favorite Things, Countdown, Out Here, Live at the Village Vanguard, Nat King Cole, and Me. This is really just the tip of the iceberg with Ulysses, and our conversation turned out to be part one of two because there was just so much to cover. In today's episode, we talk about his approach to jazz education, his new podcast series, From the Drummer's Perspective, his thoughts on entrepreneurship, and his new book, The Musician's Career Guide. Ulysses is the real deal, folks, and be sure to tune in again soon, as we will be posting part two of our conversation in the next week or so. Thanks for listening, and now please enjoy my conversation with Ulysses Owens Jr. Ladies and gentlemen, the man, the myth, the legend, the artist, the educator, the author, the producer, the nonprofit organizer. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It's absolutely mind-blowing, the sheer creative output that you continue to produce. So Ulysses, thank you for being on Speaking of the Arts.
Well, thank you for having me, man. It's my honor. So
Indeed, yeah. So yeah, lots to talk about and want to be conscious of your time. By the way, congratulations on all your success with Soul Conversations.
Oh, thank you.
Listening to this album, and I just, it is, and maybe it's partly because of what I do in the industry and the live aspect of the industry, but anytime I listen to music, that my immediate thought is, I want to see this live. I want to experience this live. Is always a good thing. And for anybody who has not heard Ulysses' album, Soul Conversations, it's his big band recorded live at Dizzy's in 2019, the end of 2019.
Yep.
The energy on that album, on those tracks, is just unbelievable. So congratulations on that.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Indeed. Well, it's fun kind of doing a little bit of research for our conversation, because anytime you get to connect with someone that you really admire and find common ground, that's always exciting. And I mentioned my background is I'm a drummer, but obviously my career, I'm a booking agent. But I thought I might start off with a simple question. Are you still a pescatarian?
Yes, and actually I just I reduced my diet even more to now just fish and veggies. Because my goal is, I'm 38 now, I'll be 39 in December. And then my goal by 40 is to potentially be fully vegan. Because I just think, like, for me, I've loved meat, and, I haven't eaten meat in a concentrated amount in 6 years. And I just like how my body felt. And as you know, you get older, particularly when you start getting over 30 and then over 35, and your body starts changing. And I just like how my body feels without meat in it. And, but for right now, I think because of travel and because of my intense schedule, it's still a little easier to have, fish incorporated into it. So, but I'm headed towards veganism.
Okay. I've been a pescatarian for almost exactly 20 years now. I made the switch my senior year in high school. So I was reading an interview you did, and somehow that came up, and I just was curious if that's still, but wow, veganism, I tried. I think I might have tried that for a minute, and that's not easy. That is not.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm actually really disciplined, and I use things like food to kind of heighten my discipline nature. So I'll start eliminating things out of my diet or out of my life to like make sure like to kind of sort of hone that tool of discipline. So that was really what it was for food. It wasn't even like a certain body goal. It was just like, okay, I feel like I was saying yes to too many things. So I was like, let me start eliminating what I'm saying yes to, and I'll start with food, because food is probably, next to spirituality and our family, food is like the most important thing. So if I can say, no to like a piece of steak, then I can say no to something else that may not be the right opportunity for me.
That is incredibly interesting. I've never heard someone describe their diet choices on those terms. For me, it was always just matter of, straight up. I always had kind of a weak stomach.
Yeah.
So, I mean, okay, I could handle chicken, but I really had a
Right.
tough time with red meat.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah.
Right, but that is really interesting. So you have been using this as a way to stay even more disciplined, although something tells me you're a pretty disciplined person.
I read this. I'm a huge podcast book lover and all that, and I read all these things, and I'm always digesting information, and so much so that sometimes I forget where I got it from, but I remember what it is. And I remember this particular thing, whether it was a podcast or whatever, and the person was talking about activating your no. And it actually stemmed from a quote from Bill Gates, I think it was, who said, really successful people say no more than they say yes. And when I heard it, it was at a point in my life where I was just really like overrun with a lot of things, like a lot of what people are seeing now, I was kind of like in the incubation period of then. And so I was just like, yo, like I'm saying yes to like too much stuff. And so it started with that. And then I heard the whole like, you need to activate your no. And I was like, well, what does that actually mean? And so then at the same time, I think I started reading or watching The Game Changer, which is an incredible, documentary about Olympic athletes, or people who, some are Olympic, but mainly athletes who switch to a vegan diet. And what I heard of, it's on Netflix, or either Netflix or Amazon. But anyway, it's this study of everybody thought that to be a well-trained athlete, that you've got to eat, steak and eggs in the morning, and then you've got to eat, a big, another steak and a salad and all this kind of stuff. And they were saying, sort of in research with cows and different animals, how all of their diet is consisted off of grains or grass. And so anyway, so the whole like activating my no really started saying, okay, one, I need to be careful about what I'm eating. I'm getting older. Two, I need to be saying no more than I'm saying yes. Three, how do I marry all those together? And activating my no is, and so then I started looking at like, what are all the things I'm saying no to? So I looked at my diet at the time, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I wasn't saying no to anything. And my body was a reflection of that. I had a, really huge stomach, my skin wasn't clear. Like I was, drinking a lot every day. It was a lot. And I was like, my life looks like I say yes to everything. I was tired. Okay. And so then I started saying, well, what would my life look like? And what will my body look like if I started saying no? And that's kind of where I'm at right now. And actually I've sort of shifted into another degree of like bumping it up a notch, because I think that I got comfortable with, okay, yeah, I'm saying no to these 30 things. I was like, now it's time to say no to 50 things, so that I can be the best me, because whatever I say yes to, I need to be the best version of myself,
Well, that offers me another opportunity to just say thank you for saying yes to this then.
Oh yeah, bro.
I'm lucky.
Crazy now.
Yes. Wow. Well, okay, just from what you're saying right now, and I'm not at all surprised to find this out, because obviously the first time you and I have had a chance to speak, you are a very intentional person. Yeah. And one of my mentors likes to say, our eyes only see and our ears only hear what our brains are looking for.
Wow,
and the way the way you get to that point is actually exactly through processes that you're describing right now, which is being very intentional, being very, it could be as simple as starting your day with, if I could do these 3, 4, 5 things, that would be great, because highlighting those individual items centers your eyes and your ears and your brain around finding information to help you with those things.
Absolutely.
So that is that's really interesting, but I'm not at all surprised to hear that is a way in which you set out to be intentional.
Cool. I'm just paying my breakfast bill, so let's keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. What was for breakfast?
I think I had an omelet, so a veggie omelet.
Okay, there you go. Sounds nice.
Trying to stay consistent.
All right. Well, I gotta ask you about from the drummer's perspective.
Okay, great.
Because that was really the catalyst that gave me, partly some of the courage, but certainly the intentionality to reach out and try to connect with you.
Okay.
But, before we talk specifically about what you're doing with that series, can you just briefly mention what is Open Studio? Because I think
Sure.
a lot of musicians in the jazz world they have no idea what that is,
Okay.
and they should. So
Yeah.
what's Open Studio?
Well, I'll tell you this: the next person you should interview, if you haven't already, is Peter Martin.
Okay.
Because Peter Martin, and I'll try to keep the story really short, but Open Studio is something I'm so proud of because I was literally there with him from the very beginning. So I'll just take you back to a very, very quick story when we were both on the road with Christian McBride. Christian had a bunch of dates come through that were not economically as strong for his Inside Straight group, but Christian being who he is, he's like, man, I want to get this music to the people. So he and his manager said, hey man, why don't we just put together like a small trio of cats or whatever, and take them out there. And so Peter at the time was doing a lot of work subbing with Inside Straight. Thank you. And I was doing some work as well. So they were like, hey, why don't y'all go with McBride? And the dates were in a place called Slovakia. And so we started going there and we did like maybe 3 or 4 dates. And that was also where like one of the infamous, I think Cherokee or like one of those tracks came about from that. And so Peter started, he had this little like flip video camera and he would literally take it everywhere. And it was like one of those like USB powered things. And I mean, he would videotape, like one time we were in Italy on tour with this very crazy promoter, which you probably know, who never has his stuff together. And he broke down like at a gas station. He busted a tire, and Peter has the whole thing on video. So it's literally, it's like McBride, like all of us like getting out of the car in hot Naples, Italy. It's hilarious. So anyway, so he started documenting this thing. Then he went from documenting like little concerts or funny events to in the middle, like if we had 2 hours off before sound check, he'd be like, hey, I'm gonna just record 2 minutes of my piano or whatever. And he started posting it on Facebook. Well, then it started going viral. And then next thing I know, he says, man, I think I'm gonna start this thing called Open Studio Network where I can basically upload lessons and whatever. Fast forward like a year, man, he decides to like build an office in St. Louis, right across from Jazz Bistro, and it just starts growing. And then he asked me to, like, if I had any ideas about a course. And so I've created my first course called Finding Your Beat, which is essentially about 4.5 hours worth of, material about jazz drum history and my concept and whatever. So we get through like all of that. Then all of a sudden, the series started doing really well, but then I saw like this crazy growth, like where it went from, being like kind of a niche thing to like, I think really COVID sort of helped. And then, I hate to say it helped, but it helped because people were online more. And so then it went from being like a good company to like a great company. He got a spread in New York Times. And I mean, and it's a different company now. And so anyway, so he approached me and said, hey, Ulysses, I love what you're doing. I had just released my brush book at the time. And he said, man, we really want you to do like another mini course. And so figure out what that is. By the time we started talking, I released my second book, my entrepreneurship book. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, man, to be honest, I'm not interested in teaching people press rolls. Like, I really want to teach people like something that they can hold on to. And it needs to be merged with entrepreneurship. Because to me, any musician today, which I'm sure we'll talk about this more at length, but like any musician today needs to juxtapose their career and their career ambitions and their technical ambitions with the idea of entrepreneurship, because it is no longer, gone are the days of just like playing really, really good music. Like now we've got to factor in playing this really good music and also like, how am I going to make a living? And it's going to more than likely be from something you create for yourself. Fast forward, I think Peter invited me to do a show with Edu Ribeiro, which is a great Brazilian drummer. And from that show, he says to me, hey, Edu's thinking about giving up, the show. Has been a lot, he loved it, but he's kind of ready to transition to something else. Would you ever want to host like that show? And I said, well, I love what Edu did. I was a guest on it and I follow some of his other episodes. I said, but if I'm going to do it, I want it to be something completely different. And so we talked through it and they were like, well, what would it be? And I said, well, how about something called like From the Drummer's Perspective? I was like, I really would love to interview not only great drummers, but great artisans of the craft, but from the perspective of the drummer, and not just like, all right, like roll call. Okay. Hey, Mike, what are the 5 things you've done? But more of like, hey, Mike, when you started your first act, as a booking agent, what is the thing you wish someone would have told you? You know what I mean? Sure. So I kind of put myself in the perspective of like, first of all, I'm a fan, but I put myself in the perspective of like that person who's sitting and trying to figure out what they want or how they want what they want. And my hope is that my interviews with these artists can sort of give them not necessarily a fast track, but at least give them like some advice that can maybe make their process a little smoother. Because I wish that I had that. I remember coming up in Jacksonville, Florida, and no drummers were passing through. You know, I got to only see like maybe John Riley, maybe Peter Erskine, maybe one other drummer. And so if I could have sat in Jacksonville as a 16, 17-year-old learning about jazz and go on the internet and watch an interview of somebody I admire, talk to someone else I admire, and have a not a surface conversation, but a very substantive one, I think it would have changed even my career. So that's what I wanted to do with the drummer's perspective. But again, it is rooted and grounded in the experience of Open Studio, which is this incredible resource for all musicians. And I also think that now Peter has opened up the conversation to people who don't want to play the Vanguard, but they still want to know what's happening at the Vanguard. So he's got this whole other database of people who are just eternal fans and want to be like learned fans, as opposed to what we've cultivated in jazz thus far, which is just being a fan, just like, you know, just patronize me, but we don't really care if you know what we're doing. And I think Peter is creating a more informed audience. And so I love Open Studio for all those reasons.
Well, wow. So, you know, for anybody listening who hasn't checked out from the drummer's perspective, it is so amazing to me how you are getting these incredible musicians, drummers, to reveal things about their journey that you really cannot find in a magazine article, and quite frankly, you probably aren't going to find in another interview that they've done, because of the perspective you're bringing to it. Like, for example, the stories I'm hearing Eric Harlan describe with Joe Henderson, and what his relationship with Betty Carter, and the stories I'm hearing Nate Smith talk about his relationship with Betty Carter, and Dave Holland, and you know, you're doing such a service to this craft. So
thank you.
Oh man, and I just hope I hope this is just the beginning. And obviously you're a busy person, but I hope you can continue it. I hope you can do not just drummers, but other people as well in the industry, all musicians.
Well, to be honest, that was actually the goal. Like, so when Peter first came to me, I had a crazy list, man, because you know, I'm really well, I'll just say this. I'm inspired by everybody. And so I was just like, yo, like I had like maybe 5 drummers and the rest were like industry execs. I had booking agents on there. I had like, you know, funders. I had like venture capitalists. Like I had a whole
the whole ecosystem.
Because my whole thing was, you know, which I still plan to do that, but maybe I'll have to use a different platform. But my whole goal was, we need to be having conversations with these people, right? So maybe you may not, Mike, well, no, I mean, you're a booking agent, so you can talk to anybody, but let's say some of your clients,
I don't know about that.
but some of your clients may never get a chance to probably sit with a venture capitalist, but chances are you may. So if your client doesn't, but maybe I can show that conversation, and there's going to be something out of that conversation that can help them. But with, you know, when we talked about Open Studio, again, they're very focused. And I love when people are focused and they're on brand, and they were like, Ulysses, we can get to that at some point. But at the end of the day, like, you are a drummer and you're a great jazz drummer, and we love you. And we know your audience is still kind of centered around that. So let's kind of start with that. And so I was like, all right, well, cool. Well, to your point, all right, then I'm going to get deep into it. I'm not going to just like ask, you know, everybody what ride cymbals they use. Because even for me, even my friends have always said to me, they're like, damn, I feel like when I'm sitting down with you, I feel like I'm in an interview. So I think that maybe that reason why it comes across, or new stories comes across, is because I actually like am interested in people. Like, I'm interested in like what, you know, like what Nate, you know, or like what Betty Carter said to Nate that made him get the gig. Like, I actually want to know that for my own knowledge, you know, absolutely. Or I would love to know, what did, you know, like, I don't know if you got to see the Hurlin interview, but I really wanted to know, like, how did Hurlin evolve into being who he was? Because to me, he is one of the most original drummers that ever played with Wynton. And so to hear the story about how he actually preceded or came after Tane, and to hear that there was such a direct sort of comparison between him and Tane,
which
and that he was actually,
if you're just
which you would never think,
yeah.
right, and actually his evolution musically was because he wanted to not be Tane. And Wynton actually said to him, I've already had that experience, give me you.
Yeah.
Now we understand what we heard and experienced for those 20 some odd years. So I think there's always a backstory behind every great thing that we experience in life. And so my goal with Drummer's Perspective is to find what that backstory is for the different guests I'm fortunate to have.
Absolutely. Wow. And as just a question, I mean, just so people who are listening can find it,
Sure.
is it available as a standalone podcast, or because I've been watching it on the Facebook feed, but can you
No,
find it?
no, man. You got to go on YouTube. So basically what
Sorry, that's
happens
what I
is
meant. I said Facebook. I meant YouTube. I meant YouTube.
absolutely. So literally Open Studios are incredible. Literally the minute that I finish, it goes right up on YouTube, like literally not even 5 minutes later. So all of those separate interviews are on YouTube, from the very first one with Lewis Nash up to the one I did last week with Jonathan Blake. And I'm really excited about the one tomorrow. It's going to be with Billy Drummond, who was my last teacher at Juilliard.
Oh,
And
wow.
and that was another thing. I wanted to interview people that I had a deep connection with. So like I've got Billy coming up tomorrow. Next week I'm interviewing Nisheet Waits. I remember spending time with Nisheet early on in my career. Terry Lynn is coming up. I remember she was so kind to me when I first started in the industry. So, these are not just like these big names, like these are names, but these are also people that I have a very personal connection with. And I think that's why the interview is a little different, because it isn't just like Joe Schmo interviewing Terry Lynn Carrington. It's like, oh, wow, Ulysses, I remember that kid. I've seen him come through the ranks, or I've seen these people on the road and had dinner and breakfast with them. So they feel they're talking to a friend, I think, versus someone who's maybe just a fan, from afar. So
Absolutely. So, right. So sorry, I've been watching it on YouTube, but is it available just audio only, like on Apple
oh no,
Podcasts? No.
that it isn't. But I will actually shoot Rachel. I'll shoot them a note and ask about that process, because I don't think any of their stuff is available audio. I think everything for them right now is all YouTube. But yeah, you and I are already thinking the same way.
Right.
So I will ask them about that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great. Well, I'm scanning through my notes here, trying to figure out like how do I navigate so much to talk about in a little amount of time. Well, you kind of just laid the path for this conversation with the theme of entrepreneurship, and so we can pick any number of things you are doing as an entrepreneur. For example, the book you just released, The Musician's Career Guide. The courses you've developed, BeMoreThanADrummer.com, which I love that title for a website.
Thank you.
So maybe just for people who are not listening, you're, as an educator at Juilliard, entrepreneurship is a large focus of what you're doing there. Is that correct?
Well, it's actually starting to become that. When I was first invited almost 6 years ago, Winton and Dr. Aaron Flagg, wanted me to just be a small ensemble director, which basically means I have an ensemble that consists of about 7 to 10 students. And those students perform, 6 concerts, obviously before COVID, but about 6 concerts a year. And so it's my goal to really, basically, I run it like a band. I put together a band, or I should say they put together a band for me. And then my job is to mentally, spiritually, and, academically, philosophically, and in every way condition them to get them to first think like one moving organism, and then through this moving organism, or as we're a moving organism, I should say, we then tackle these different goals, and so that's what I've been doing. Now, when COVID happened, it completely rocked all of us. But that is my main goal. And I have a great time. I've had some, I was just laughing, like yesterday I was on Instagram and I was looking at Newport Jazz Festival, and a bunch of guys that are playing were like my students, like Emmanuel Wilkins, was my student. Gifton Gellin was my student. So it's really amazing to now be like, wow, am I that guy now that like I'm looking at jazz festival pamphlets and seeing my students have incredible careers? Like that's, it's a really good feeling. So first, that's my role. In addition to that, from the moment I got to Juilliard, I was very honest about my passion for entrepreneurship. And I've been developing this work for many years. Before it became a book, it was like a workbook. Before it was a workbook, it was sort of a lot of notes. And before it was that, it was like lectures. So I've been doing this work, and Juilliard has what's called the Alan D. Marks Entrepreneurship Center. And because they're aware of the work I've been doing, they would have me come in from day one for various like lunch and learn sessions. They'd have me come in to the jazz group, and I talk to the student body. I've been doing that for probably 3 years. And then now that the book is out, Barrett Hypes, who is one of the lead administrators in that division, wants me to now teach some courses. So I'm thinking, matter of fact, I just emailed with him the other day. I think in the spring, I will be teaching some kind of an entrepreneurship course, but then also in the fall, I think I'll be doing different like pop-ups. But my ultimate goal, and I've had a very candid conversation with him at Juilliard and the administration, I think that we need to do a better job at Juilliard with regard to entrepreneurship. And I think, I'll just leave it at that, but he agreed. And so what Barrett and I are trying to do is we kind of have this overarching goal of like where we want to be in the next sort of 3 years in terms of the offerings that Juilliard can give our student body. And then kind of from there, we're looking at like, all right, in addition to that, here's what we want to accomplish. So yeah, man. So that's kind of my involvement. So it's the entrepreneurial side is becoming more and more and more of a thing. But the small ensemble director thing, that's sort of been the entree for 6 years.
Well, yeah. So here's why I'm bringing it up, because I was fortunate. I went to a pretty good music school. I went to Indiana University.
Oh, it's a very good music school.
Well, yeah, but nothing disrespectful about my experience there at the time. But fact of the matter, zero mention of the word entrepreneur. Like not even. And I graduated in 2006, so it's not that long ago. And just by way of experience I've had professionally, networking with people, speaking to other educators at various schools, my impression, if I'm trying to take an eagle eye of the country, the scope of where things are at with music education, there's really only a small handful of schools, Juilliard, Berkeley, North Texas, some of those well-known names that are consciously making an effort towards entrepreneurship for music. And the reality, of course, is that a lot of schools, they can't afford the resources. I get that, but
no, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mike. It's BS. The real and I have a I'm gonna release something on. Is this public? Like what? How do you release this on YouTube or something?
We do it on YouTube. We have speakingthearts.com, and it's on
great.
Apple iTunes.
So I'll release some hot off the press information. I actually interviewed at Indiana. Okay. They had a position about 2 years ago for the jazz drum professorship.
Yes,
and it was
that's why I was there when Steve was there.
Yeah, so when Steve was getting ready to transition, and it was between me and two other people. One is the person that got it, and I remember talking to them and saying, "Hey, like, because at this point my book had already been published, but I think it was going to be out. Well, excuse me, I just got the deal, and it was going to be out like maybe a year from that, whenever it was. But I remember talking to them, meeting with their music business department, their entrepreneurship department, and saying, listen, I know I'm coming in potentially as this guy for jazz drums, but I was like, we need to remodel, like we need to make this the focus. And I remember there being like one side of administration being really excited, like, oh my God, Ulysses, like, where do we start? And the other side being like, I don't know. And what I will say, the reason why I interrupted you is I'm going to call BS, and I have no problem doing it. I'm going to call BS, and it's not just directed at Indiana University, but I'll direct it at a lot of colleges. The problem is that when you start talking about entrepreneurship, people get nervous. You know why? Because people's egos get involved and they get threatened. Because when you start talking about entrepreneurship, it's then a measuring contest, right? And so then it becomes, well, damn, like, is this professor really everything I thought that they were? Or is this department everything I thought? Because when you talk about entrepreneurship is a forward moving thing, right? Like, to be entrepreneurial is to be ever evolving, to be ever growing, to be ever, revamping, restructuring. And most people aren't doing that. And a lot of the university system and the academic system is a for-profit institution. And so to keep that going, there are people that get locked in that system and they stay in it for 30, 40 years. They get tenure or whatever. So what I will say is it's not resources, because who's more resourceful than $1 billion university, right? Well said, the issue is, if I start talking about entrepreneurship, it's going to reveal I'm probably not the best person for this job, and that there's probably someone else that could be better at this job. And so where my book and where my efforts are coming is, I think it's incredibly selfish, because you're now, like, before we could get away with it, but now with COVID, we are literally sending students into a war zone, and we're not even giving them a gun. We're not even like showing them that they're going to need a weapon. That is essentially what we're doing. So the reason why I cut you off is because I think you were expressing an ideology that, and it's not you, but that a lot of people hide behind. But I'm telling you, the reason why we're not teaching entrepreneurship has nothing to do with resources. It has nothing to do with even with the students. It is a selfish, egotistical thing that people are hiding.
I hear you. I believe you. I hear you. That's always the challenge, just at a basic level with like jazz education. Does this instructor have the credentials to back up? Right. Okay. So if you've got that, you are a diamond in the rough, because not many people are a complete musician, complete artist in the traditional sense, but the entrepreneurial sense. I mean, you are bringing to the table exactly what I think is an ideal to, So no, I get it. That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, because it's very antiquated, and those people have been there a long time. They've been in the classroom a long time.
Yeah, and even like for me, quote unquote, being a diamond in the rough or being the perfect person for it, I think that I'm ideal for some scenarios because I'm ever evolving, right? Like the idea about entrepreneurship is this thing where you're constantly changing, you're constantly growing. But the other part of it is entrepreneurship is the study of your own personal resources. And, jazz has a huge stigma of, and I talk about this a lot in my book, where we don't want to tell stories. We don't want to tell you like, we don't want to remove the curtain of like, here's who's behind the curtain, is we want to show up with our, fancy hats on and our big careers. And we want to just act like it was something that magically happened. Whereas then you and I both know, you're a booking agent. You and I both know whether it's Maria Schneider or Pat Metheny or Ron Carter or Christian McBride or Wynton Marsalis. We can go down the list of some of the top successful musicians right now in jazz. They are all business-minded people. Yes. All of them.
Yes. Yes.
like all of them. Like they're not like, yes, they're great artists. Yes, Maria is she lives in the ethereal world of, the atonal and the whatever, but Maria is a businesswoman. Yes, Pat Metheny is a business mogul. Yep. And to me, we're doing people a disservice, and we're making them think that if you just become very, very talented, that all that other stuff will take care of itself, and it's not. And now you are actually getting to the point where there are more people that are actually less talented but more business minded, getting further along than those that are more talented and less business minded. So that's actually becoming the thing. So to your point, I think we just don't want to be real about it, But I'm hoping to keep pushing the conversation so that we can be.
Right, absolutely. Well, it's interesting too, is that most people don't even know the definition of an entrepreneur, and you just touched on it exactly, which is, so the word itself comes from a French economist, Jean-Baptiste Say, in the 1800s. It's Jean-Baptiste Say, however you spell that. Anyway, he was an economist, and he said an entrepreneur is someone who moves resources from a lower level to a higher level of productivity. And you were just talking about entrepreneurship as being a resource game. And it 100% is. How do you move resources from a lower level to a higher level of productivity? How do you create something from nothing? How do you bring together different talents to create value, right? All these things. I'm trying to just segue towards some of the entrepreneurial endeavors you're doing. Yeah. You mentioned the book a few times, The Musician's Career Guide. What is it?
So The Musician's Career Guide, and sort of the subtext or subtitle is turning your talent into sustained success. But you had another question in addition to that.
No. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about it, because when I haven't had a chance to read it, but one of the things I saw in the bullet point summary of it that I thought is so important, also something that's never talked about in music education, is how do you preserve your mental and spiritual energy? How do you not get burnt out? How do you stay positive? It seems like you kind of touched on some of that.
Well, my goal was that I wanted to create a book that addressed everything that is not being addressed, right? So the first thing I'll tell you is that the whole Musician's Career Guide idea was a journal that I started writing since I was in college. When I was in college, I took 2 business classes. One was a classical one, and another one was for the jazz division. Both were, one was really helpful. The one that was for the jazz division, the one for classical was a complete waste. Because one, I'm a jazz musician, and it was based on an antiquated model. and the whole class was 1 semester, which is hideous to me. You know, they'll keep you in ear training for 4 years, but won't give you more than a semester of something that can teach you how to make money.
Right.
But anyway, so I digress. But anyway, so the whole course was about a headshot, writing a cover letter, and applying for orchestras.
Okay.
And that particular year, the New York Times issued an article that I think 50% of the orchestras in our country were closing. So I say all that to say, like, I started journaling like all the stuff that I wanted to know. Then I graduated and moved back home to Jacksonville because I needed to figure some things out. And then I started journaling there, like, okay, what, like, I wish someone would have taught me this or someone would have taught me that. Then when I started playing with Kurt Elling and moved back to New York, I would, you know, have these fireside chats with Kurt and his band and, you know, promoters. And, you know, I got really close with Marianne Topper. Like she and I were, you know, she would always call me kid, and I would, you know, we would, like, she would call me and give me the dates for his schedule. And then she'd be like, what else are you up to, honey? You know, tell me what you're thinking about, you know, and if you ever want to be serious about a career, you know, you can do it. You have a leader capability. Like, so I would have these fireside chats with people like Marianne Topper. And then when I got in McBride's band with him and his manager and all, you know, and so I just started building this journal. And so when I looked up and I left McBride's band, after 7 years with him, because I knew that staying with McBride was going to be incredible, but I knew that if I stayed with him, I would never find out who I was, because he's such a beautiful, big personality, but I knew there was something in me as well. And so he was incredibly gracious. He was like, Ulysses, I knew this day was going to come. You got my support and you got my blessing. So I had a meeting with Chamber Music America after I left, and they were like, so what are you up to now? And so I just mentioned a few different things I wanted to apply for. And I said, hey, by the way, I got this journal of notes that are about probably 15 years old, and they're everything I wish I would have known about the music business. And Gargi Shindy and Susan Dadian said, Ulysses, you need to start lecturing about that, because everybody knows, you know, you've had some of the best gigs in the industry, and you're telling us that you documented all of that. And I said, yeah. And they said, you need to start developing that. So I started lecturing. And then as I would lecture around the country, then people would say, where's the book? And so I started the process, and probably that process was about 3 to 4 years from, you know, I pitched the publisher that initially, with the publisher that signed me, I pitched them initially and they turned me down. Then I went back to them because they still gave me great advice. Actually, when they turned me down, they basically said, your idea is really good, but it's not fine tuned. So they said, but we wish you the best. And they gave me a couple key things to do. Well, I went back to them just to say thank you, you know, like a year and a half later, for giving me that advice and letting them know that I had now lectured, you know, halfway across the country. I was now going to write a workbook, and I wanted to just thank them. And the guy that turned me down, he was no longer there, but the head of the publishing company was like, hey, Ulysses, can you tell me about this idea? Like, what, you know, like, why did we turn you down? Because I wasn't part of that decision.
There you go.
And so I was like, oh, right. So I was like, well, actually I did da 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 da. And he was like, do you have a book proposal? And I was like, well, I was like, can I get back to you? So then I called my friend who has several books. I was like, what's a book proposal? and he told me. And so he connected me with my co-writer, Arlen Gargaleano. And Arlen had written tons of book proposals. And so we basically took the idea, all these notes, and we put it into a book proposal. And they decided to sign the book, man. And here we are. So I think that what I'm proud about with this book, to your point, is that I deal with, I think, the 3 to 4 facets of what I think a student needs to know. One is, first, the idea of mastery, right? Mastery is, to me, the educational journey to understanding your craft. That is where we have to all start, you know. So that's your instructors, that's you know, having formal instruction, that's you going to college, whatever. Then we shift to that, to, you know, okay, like, where do you want to continue to further that talent? Then we shift to that, to what is the music business? You know, what is the career desire and profile that you have? You know, and then let's get deeper into the music business. Then we shift from that into what is entrepreneurship, you know, and then what is career development? And then after that, then we go to sort of the holistic side of, now that we've dealt with sort of the theoretical and all of that, let's make sure that who we are physically, mentally, and spiritually is holistically sound, because that is the engine behind all of these other things. Right. And if you are all over the place mentally or spiritually, then you won't even be able to get on stage, because you don't have the certain level of focus. So and then the cool thing I'm excited about is that I was literally turning in my final manuscript in March of 2020, which was the height of like literally the beginning of the pandemic. So I said to the publisher, I was like, hey, can I write like an addendum? Like I want to write a section on COVID. And what I sort of, a friend of mine coined this term, pandemic entrepreneurship. And I wrote an article actually for Jazz Times about it. So basically what I wanted to do was I added sort of that piece of pandemic entrepreneurship for musicians into the book. So I think it is also the only music business book that talks about the pandemic and entrepreneurship. So to your point, it was just all these things kept coming together, but I wanted it to be a living, breathing tool that could be relevant at least for the next few years. And then I'm certain I'll probably have to update it, and because the industry is changing so much.
Indeed, yeah. Well, Ulysses, you've long since paid your check at your breakfast table there. So I don't want to keep you. Maybe just to close out, and I have 7 more topics. Maybe we should do a part 2 if you're up for it.
Please, and I was going to say to you, so let's do. I'll answer one more question, but I'm actually back in town. I'm in Jacksonville, not next week, but the week after. So I guess the week of the 17th. Okay. Let's set up a part 2, and we can do it from my studio. And I would love to finish out those questions for you, because I like talking to you, but I also think that we have a nice banter that I think could be great to unveil some things for your audience. So let's just do a part 2.
Yes. Absolutely. Let's just call it right there. And everybody listening, you've just had the pleasure of listening to Ulysses Owens Jr. I've learned so much in our time, and as we just said, there's going to be a part 2. So to be continued.
Yes, and Mike, just shoot me an email today, and let's pick a date, and let's get it on the books, man. We'll make it happen.
Let's do it. All right, enjoy your residency, and I can't wait to hear what comes of that.
Thanks, brother. Take care, man.
All right, take care. Bye.